So I wanted to first thank you guys for having me and apologize for the swap. Mike Bologna was supposed to be here today but had a conflict. Even if I underwhelm you and you're disappointed to see me versus him, I hope that you find my demeanor to be a little bit more pleasant than that of Mr. Bologna. With that said, I will jump right in. So if we take a look at TV, it's pretty amazing to think about the strides and changes that have happened in the TV landscape. When you look at that TV, I mean, TV used to be a piece of furniture, and TV is now not a piece of furniture. TV is not just something that we put on the wall. TV is definitely not something that the whole family comes together in the living room and watches the same piece of content. The definition of television has changed, and it's a very personal experience, so consumers are accessing content however and whenever they want. But right now, we're in a transformational state of television, and Modi actually expects that in the next 2 years, television will change more than it has in the last 50. So it's a very exciting time to be in television. I hope that you are all as excited as we are. There are a couple of things that are driving the majority of change in television, and those two things are data and technology. Data allows us to do a couple of things. It allows us to get more granular in our targeting and walk away from targeting based on demo. Data also gives us transparency into what works in television and helps us optimize campaigns moving forward. Technology allows consumers to watch television however they want, and it also allows us as marketers to send messages in a more targeted, granular fashion. There is a reason why $80 billion is spent every year in television, and that reason is simple. Television works, and now we finally have the data to prove it. So if everyone went and they dusted off their old marketing textbook from their first semester in college, you would look at the marketing funnel. There'd be that beautiful marketing funnel that we all look at, and then we'd look at awareness, and we'd see TV right next to it, because everyone thought that that's all television does. It drives awareness. If you've ever heard Erwin Gottlieb, who's the chairman of Group M, speak about addressability and speak about, if the question that we get asked a lot is, once addressable television is at full scale, will it replace linear television? And our answer is always no. If the first time that you guys saw an ad for an expensive car or for a Rolex was when you were 40, got a bonus, and could afford it, it would be hard for us as marketers to convert, because you need the national television driving that awareness, building the brand equity, building the admiration for the product. And now, because we have data and tech, we're able to use television and insert it lower at the funnel, reach prospects, and drive them to that final conversion. So the other things that TV can now do is TV can drive brand favorability. It can drive all the way down the purchase funnel down to sales, and we have data to prove it. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to take you through sort of our data toolbox and like what we're using for both targeting and measurement, and then I'm going to go through some casework. Okay, so when a client has first-party data, it is always awesome to be able to leverage that data. We use that data in a couple of different ways. We use the data for targeting, and we also use the data for measurement. If a client has a first-party data set and they have a prospect list, a lot of times we don't use the full list. So if you already have your really heavy customers, so Panera and TGI Fridays, they're customers that are their heavy, extremely loyal customers, you probably don't need to send them an incremental message because they're going to come anyway. So we focus the addressable messages on their medium to light customers. We also are able to use the first-party data to show them how the campaign worked based on their KPIs. So the thing that gets a little bit messy with addressable television, I think that everyone confuses it and thinks that it's addressable is programmatic and it's automated, and it's actually one of the most manual things that I've ever done in my entire life. We laugh, like I call Modi, like we're a human dashboard fusing everything together, making it seem seamless and easy for the client. But behind the scenes, it's really hard to actually execute this the right way. And there's no sort of standard measurement. So before the campaign, we need to make sure that we have a conversation with the client and ask them, what do you want to learn? And then figure out the best data and the best test design to get at those results. The next thing that we can do is we can use companies like Experian and Axiom and Newstar and IXI to work with, go below the demo. So instead of buying adults 18 to 49, I can buy moms with kids or households with dogs. Also, when clients spend a bajillion dollars creating a segmentation study, and they hand it to the agency, and the agency really has nothing they can do with it, we can now take those segments and we can buy media against those segments, making it actionable for the client. Shopper data, we're using Nielsen Catalina and Shopcom, so based on that data, that's loyalty card data. So when you guys go into the store and you swipe those cards, that means I know what toothpaste you purchase, I know how often you purchase it, and I can go after you with a competitive message. On the back end, we can use the same data to show clients that households that were exposed to the ad purchased the toothpaste at a higher rate than those that were not exposed to the ad. Bank and credit card data. So think of this as anything that comes up on your credit card statement. So you went to Subway, you went to the movies. We can target based on that behavior and then allow insight into the competitive set. So a lot of times with a client, we'll use first-party data to see how they delivered against their customers, and then we'll supplement the measurement with bank card data to show them how they did against the competitive set, and we're able to actually show them a share shift analysis so they can optimize what we're doing in targeting in the next campaign. More data. So auto registration, a lot of times, I actually, on the plane last night, I was looking at our presentation. This is like the first time that I actually rewrote the presentation last night after I had my Chardonnay buzz, because I was sick of talking about the same case studies over and over again. And when people talk about addressable, a lot of the case studies that we talk about auto, we talk about CPG, and we talk about financial services, and sometimes tune-in. But there's ways that we can apply this across all categories. So today, I just wanted to talk about some of the different applications of addressability and show you that it's not just, we don't just sell cars, there's different ways to use the data. That being said, auto is a strong category because we have access to Experian auto and Polk data, which is literally state-by-state DMV registration data that we're able to, I know what type of car you all drive, I know when you're in market, and I could send you a message within that 6-month period to drive a conversion. A lot of times with auto, the client gets really excited about the measurement. With all this stuff, you go in, you talk to them, you have transparency, you can learn, everything's wonderful, and then everyone says the campaign runs, and then it's the second the campaign's over, where's the data, where's the data, where's the data? And the truth is, it takes a while to get it because of the attribution window, but we figured out ways to supplement to get the client some information. So an example of that is for our auto clients, we work with mobile location data. So while they have to wait the 90-day attribution window, and then it takes another 30 to 60 days to collect that auto registration data, the client wants money, I want to give them the results because I want their money. So the mobile location data allows us to show that we were able to drive traffic to the dealers, so we can get that to them a couple weeks after the campaign, and then they wait the attribution window to get the hard sales data. And then insurance claims data, I'm going to go through a case study. That's actually the first case study in pharma, because this is a new category for addressable television. The reason why it's a new category is first we had to get through the privacy hurdles, so all of the MVPDs, the addressable MVPDs, which you heard from Adam this morning from Dish. There's also AT&T, which is the legacy DirecTV inventory, Altice, which is the legacy Cablevision inventory, and Comcast. So basically, we had to get through the privacy concerns. They had to make sure that the data was onboarded in a way that was privacy compliant and that their PII wasn't breached. So we got through that. And then the next thing that happened, it was the addressable providers started to accept 60-second units. So now across the majority of the MVPDs, we can, actually all of the MVPDs that accept addressable, we can target at the household using the data, and we can also insert 60-second units. Okay, so a lot of times at conferences, people come up and they talk about the results of an addressable television campaign, and I don't think that, I think that we go through it too quickly, and I don't think that people realize why with addressable television and working with the MVPDs gives us such an advantage to provide clean results for the client. So the way that we do every campaign is test versus control against households that are in target for the campaign. So if I want to go after households that are in market to drive a luxury automobile, the first thing that we do is we take the Experian auto data and we match it against the subscriber files from each of the MVPDs. The households that match, that would be our incident size, and we'd say, okay, we want to target 22% of the households, but I want to keep a 10% holdback. It's important to do that because the households have the same propensity to be in market for a car, but the only variance is the incremental frequency of the addressable television campaign. So that's important because if you're doing anything else, if you're testing national television, if you're testing local, a lot of the methodology is pre versus post, and you're not able to get a clean read on on the execution. Okay, first time I'm doing this case study. Very exciting stuff. So for this campaign, we targeted households that had suffered from migraines, and they were either taking a prescription migraine medicine or OTC medicine. So to do that, for the prescription, we used IMS data to get after the insurance claims data and anyone that actually has said that they had migraine issues, and then we combined that with shopper data to get the OTC. So we put those together, and that was our target. And then we did a combination of linear addressable and one-to-one household addressable with Dish and Direct. The results speak for themselves. The ROI on the campaign was 4-to-1. The lift in new patients was 4 times. There's 18% increase in diagnosed visits, and that's important because what that means is because we were able to serve a more relevant message to people that were suffering from migraines, it was more relevant. They went and had a conversation with the doctor, and the doctor was actually able to help them. So better targeting does help. It's not just creepy, like my grandmother says. And then we're able to actually retain customers and get them to come back. So this one is for a flower company. We use their first-party data to target their existing customers. We use credit card data to get at their competitive set, and we put that together. We did this campaign, we executed this at the household, and we also executed at the device. So the scale of addressable television in the US right now is 1/3 of all US TV households. Because of all the mergers that happened last year, it slowed down the penetration. So the number by, I don't know, next year, Q1, Q2, we're probably looking at half of all US TV households. But still, in order to really scale it out, we use exactly the same data working with 4Info, and we're able to, before the campaign, look at households that fit the targeting criteria, mobile only, mobile and TV only, and actually we're able to deliver true cross-screen attribution to the client. So when we looked at the return on ad spend, it was 7-to-1 TV only, 8-to-1 when we layered on the mobile, so showing that TV and mobile together worked better. You know, all this stuff isn't mind-blowing, it's what we always thought, but we never had the real data to prove that it worked. And then the penetration, we said the sales rate went up, and we were able to show them the actual competitors where they stole the share from. We also supplemented this with a brand health study. So the majority of our campaigns, I'd say 90% of the time, we try to go after a harder metric. But if that's not the KPI that the client wants to go after, or if there's not a way to get at an actual sale, we'll supplement it with a brand health study. So here you could see that we were able to raise brand perception. They thought it was a higher quality. It helps me know exactly helps me say exactly how I feel. It's very fuzzy stuff, but it worked across the board. This next one, this was to drive off-premise sales for a craft beer company. So again, we use the ShopCom data to target existing customers of the craft beer and the competitive set, and we were able to show a 28% lift in sales, and that was driven by penetration. So they were successful in doing what they wanted to do, stealing share from other craft beer companies. We saw the awareness go up, and we also saw 5 times total ad awareness. So this was a brand that had never been in television before, sort of thought they were like a cool brand. They were nervous to go with television in a big way, but because we were able to target only relevant households, they felt comfortable with the execution. This is my last one, so don't worry. So I think it's important to not only show everything's positive. So I just showed you 3 case studies where the return on ad spend was 4 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times. It doesn't always happen, and that's okay. But what's amazing is that we actually have the data to figure out what is broken at a campaign and fix it moving forward. So this was a 2-level test that we did with one of our clients, and the goal was really to optimize their total television spend. This is a client that spends a ton of money in national television and has really low historical bases, so there's a lot of weight going on during the test. But instead of taking their national levels down, we just wanted to run it, see what happened, and then get the data to actually figure out what to do moving forward. So when we looked local versus addressable, both had lifts over the national in driving sales, but addressable was more effective in driving the lift. Then when we looked at addressable, it says a 30% lift. So if we just stopped there and showed the client that, everybody would have been happy. But we like to take it to the next level and look at the return on ad spend. So when you looked at the return on ad spend for this campaign, the return on ad spend was negative. So every dollar they spent, they only gained back 55 cents. Not the most amazing thing to tell a client, but a lot of times, like if you're selling like a car or something expensive, you see high return ad spends. When you're selling a CPG product that has a low cost, like a lot of times these campaigns don't pay out. So when we looked at the national television and the local television, nothing was positive. But when we went to the client, we were able to come back with them, this is what we learned and this is how we can fix it. So the first thing that we learned was that the ROI wasn't positive, but there were ways that we could make the campaign more efficient. So one thing that we did, and Adam and the other MVPDs didn't like getting this call, but I now knew like the threshold that I could pay to make it an economically, smart move for my client. So we negotiated a discount off of the future buy. The other thing that we did was we had the data to show what the optimal frequency levels were. So I know how much frequency I need to drive the conversion. So I saw that I needed to be at 4 to 5 times a week. Addressably, it had been planned a little bit higher, and there's about 2 frequency running nationally. So now they can either take their national television down, or I could buy at lower levels addressably, so the out-of-pocket is lower. So that will help bring up the efficiency of the buy. The other piece that we learned is like we were able to get the networks, the day parts, the day of the week that are highest to drive the conversion by taking the sales data for each network and then normalizing it based on the media that ran, so we can help them optimize their buys moving forward. And then the other thing for this campaign is initially they had intended to do a custom creative unit and they didn't. So if you have a ton of TV, like generally addressable television, it works. It works, a lot of clients, when you talk about this first, everyone wants to do a custom creative message, but when it comes down to it, no one's able to execute because of cost or timing. But in this case, like if they really want to leverage the opportunity and leverage all the data granularity on the targeting, we suggested that they move forward with custom creative messages.
Sit down.
Okay.
Just pull it up a little bit.
Hi, great presentation as always. How do you go about deciding, what data partner to use? If you go to a lot of the different MVPDs and say, I want a tech adopter, they'll each use a different definition of that, which will lead to a different audience size. So do you have all that in-house and you just make the decision and say, this is what we're doing, or what's your approach?
No, I mean, the data is still, like the MVPDs are the ones that have to house the data because it needs to be matched against their subscriber files. But we don't go to them and say a target. We go to them and say, here's who I want to reach and here's the data set I want you to use. So we make sure that we're using a unified data set across all the providers. And then when we expand it to mobile, we're even using the same data for mobile as well. So we don't say like, I want to reach this. We tell them, I want to reach, this is the target, and this is the data set. So it makes sure it's uniform across all the providers.
Are those two, is that typically Experian or Axiom that are providing that data set? Or are there other players that you're getting data from?
Did you watch my presentation? It depends. So it's Experian, it's Axiom, it's KBM, it's Newstar, it's IXI, it's Shopcom, it's Nielsen Catalina. So it depends on the category.
Right.
Is the data set that we recommend.
Thank you.
I have my favorites. Everybody does. Sometimes a client will have an affinity towards a data company. Like, we're working with Bayer. They work with IRI, so like we mix it in with Shopcom. A lot of times, like just because of the way the research comes back, like we are more comfortable with certain data sets. So if they leave it up to me, I can make a recommendation. Or if they have a strong affinity, then I could do it that way.
Yes, great presentation. I was saying you showed negative return ad spend. Can you elaborate more? How was that calculated and why? It looks So was all the ripple effect of selling included, or was only direct sales during the campaign?
So all the return on ad spend is calculated off of incremental sales. So yeah, if I calculated off of total sales, it would have been a positive return on ad spend, but that wouldn't be honest. So it's all off of, we do test versus control, look at the buy rates of exposed versus not exposed, and then just take the incremental sales.
Right, but may have been a brand impact additional to that, and there may have been indirect sales, even though, was there any further analysis, or was only what was sold?
So that case study, I literally just got the research back from it last week and presented that to the client on Monday. So we are digging in a little bit deeper, but yeah, so we'll go in deeper, and next GABBCON we'll talk about it.
So as you were describing, working with multiple providers of addressable TV, do you see the industry going towards a unique identifier, for these data sets versus kind of, piecing together multiple providers? Do you see the providers eventually kind of working together to create a unique identifier like a device ID or a cookie or something like that?
Well, with the data companies, each of the MVPDs do have a unique identifier. So if you go to an Experian has their data spine of 200 million households, and they have against each person, Jamie Power, she has Time Warner, this is her mobile device, this is her smart TV. So they have it all sort of pinned together. So an Experian, a KBM, an Axiom to a certain extent, they're all bringing that together in a spine. That way down the road you could actually do true cross-screen attribution across all channels.
And then even on the, the television provider level, like a Dish or a DirecTV or something, do you see them ever creating their own identifier, kind of like mobile is done or a desktop is done?
So it's a little bit more challenging for them just because of the PII that's attached to it. So they have to be really careful and make sure that they're not breaching any of the privacy. So I think that's why it's not sort of haphazardly thrown around. That's my best answer, and Adam can probably, you're shaking your head? Okay, yeah, so it's the PII thing that is just a huge blocker to make it easy to execute.
Cool, thank you.
When you're comparing the test and control groups, is it true that then the controls are getting either no or fewer exposures overall to the campaign than the test groups?
Yeah, so it's it's exposed, it's in target households, so they have the same propensity to tune into a show, buy the soup, whatever we're doing, and then the only variance is we keep a 10% holdback that doesn't get the incremental addressable ads. So that's how they're getting everything else that's happening in the marketplace, they're just not getting the extra addressable frequency.
So how do we know that the impact that you're seeing in addressable households isn't because those households just got more of it than the control?
Well, that is what we're measuring. That's absolutely what we're measuring.
So just more exposure.
It's just more exposure.
Oh.
Yeah. So
It's not that it's addressable.
exactly. So going down the road, when more advertisers start to play with creative messaging and different versioning, it'll get more intricate. But right now, literally what we're testing is what does incremental frequency do to high value households, and that's what we're testing.
Okay, thank you. So it's more about the incremental exposure than about the fact that it was bought as addressable.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Any others? So in terms of the way addressable is thought of, and you alluded to this in the presentation, that finance or auto is where people think of addressable most. Why do you think people don't think of addressable as a means in CPG or pharma or in beer or some of the other case studies that you talked about?
So CPG is a little bit of a barrier because a lot of those clients have their national cable bases are very, very efficient. So when you go out, every time before we recommend doing a campaign, we do the math, and we figure out what you're paying nationally, what the effective CPM is against the target, and what the addressable CPM is.
Yep.
And when you have really broad targets, if you're going after something like toothpaste, if Colgate said, I want to reach everyone that brushes their teeth, I'd say, wonderful, go buy national cable. If they came to us and said, I want to conquest against Crest, then it makes sense. So it's figuring out the targeting, and then also it's just the efficiency of the pricing. So if CPG, we do a lot of work with CPG, OTC is a category that's growing. I think there's an application in every single category, but I just don't think in every situation addressable makes sense.
Okay. And where are clients' heads with regards to creative versioning? Are we still seeing the same creatives being used for addressable?
I mean, for the most part, we are. It's, you know, it's expensive to have different creative versions put, and it just people, they always want to do it and they can't. I think that some of our clients are going to start to, now that we have robust results and we're showing them, you know, if this works, now they're willing to make more of a creative investment. But before you had the data to show them that addressable television worked, I think they were hesitant to spend extra incremental money on the creative aspect as well.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So we talked about the IP versus linear addressability earlier, and this excitement about the potential move to IP and the additional homes that it may represent. How does Modi think about that? Is it just icing on the cake, or is that the future of addressable TV?
So I think that it complements what we're doing. So like right now, like we obviously have worked with the MVPDs to build our business for the last 3 years, but to us, an addressable household is an addressable household. And as long as we can manage the frequency, then we're okay with it. But we just need to make sure that the buy makes sense for the client.
Okay. And I think, you know, for the brands in the room and potentially the agencies as well, what do you see as the biggest barrier or challenge in trying to sell addressability through to a client? Obviously, you guys have a practice that's entirely focused on this, but we're not seeing the windfall in terms of dollars in addressable yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think focusing on it, because it's not an easy thing to execute. And when general media practitioners try to execute a campaign, like yes, everyone can call up the providers and say, I want to reach this audience. But then when you start getting the attribution, it gets complicated. The attribution is never the same for any campaign. Like you do need to actually guide and make sure you're working with the research companies. So yeah, like you have a lot of clients like coming in and out and just doing one campaign, but not actually seeing the results and understanding, you know, what works. I mean, we do a lot of Q&A and we get the results back. And I'm not sure that had I been in my previous life, I was a media strategist and in sales, and had I not been spending all of my time getting familiar with the data and the tech and how it all works, like I don't think I would have been able to pick out the mistakes that I can pick out today.
And so are there pitfalls or things that agencies or brands in the room can take as opportunities or lessons learned to bring back to try and do more addressable in their own businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to think about the target, make sure that, you know, it's a smart target and it makes sense that you're not reaching it nationally. Generally, we say if the target's between 5 and 30%, that would be the sweet spot for addressable television campaign. Once you get over 30%, it's more efficient to buy it nationally. You want to make sure that you do the math for the client to make sure it's not more efficient for them to purchase it nationally. And then you have a starting place when you negotiate with the MVPDs of what the price can be and what the client can pay. And then you want to make sure that you always have the conversation with the client about what they want to learn, because like I said, there's no standard measurement, so nothing's more disappointed when you're so excited to give a client the results and they're like, yeah, that's not what I wanted to learn. So you need to make sure that you need to set the test design up and work with the MVPDs to make sure that the research is going to deliver on that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie, for coming from New York and joining us.